Kia ora, welcome to Parliament TV. Over the next hour, we present items from the TVNZ collection, from archives held by Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision, to remember the politics from our past.
The 1996 general election was our first under the mixed member proportional system. The National Party formed a coalition government with the New Zealand First Party. This included several new Māori members of Parliament. 100 days later, in March 1997, the Marae programme took a look at what progress had been made.
Kia ora again, I'm Derek Fox and welcome to the first Aurere for 1997. And what an exciting political year we've had already. And the coalition government produced from our first MMP Parliament is still only a little over 100 days old. Shortly I'll be talking to our first two guests for the year. All the way from what used to be called Te Rua Toria and Tairāwhiti, we have Hekia Parata, a former diplomat and senior civil servant who now does consultancy from home. And Willie Te Aho, the former Chief Executive Officer from Te Runanga or Tūranga Nui a Kiwa, who's at Waikato University now doing more study and is also lecturing in law. Tēnā kōrua, I'm hira mo te tauhau.
Kia koe.
But first we have this background report from Arana Taumata.
E ngai ui o te motu, tēnā koutou katoa, mai te whare pāre mata. Well, Parliament may still look the same, but within the corridors of power there have been dramatic changes. There are now 15 Māori MPs in our first MMP Parliament. The government, of course, is a coalition between National and New Zealand First, and it's these factors that could make 1997 a watershed year for Māori aspirations. The new Minister of Māori Affairs agrees it's going to be a big year.
We're excited. The public is certainly waiting with bated breath about what we do on a number of issues, and I think that we've got the right team to put together some what I think are great initiatives for our people to get stuck into. And so yeah, it is I suppose it is a watershed for Māori in terms of New Zealand politics.
Tau Henare will this year implement the Kāwatea policy. In 1991, the then Māori Affairs Minister Winston Peters launched this initiative, staking his political career on it.
They know we cannot carry this baggage of failure into the 21st century and be a first world nation. That's what's at stake here, and as a consequence I believe I can sell it to the country, having already sold it to Māoridom, and after that the caucus and the cabinet.
History, of course, tells us Winston Peters' tenure as National's Māori Affairs Minister was short-lived, and Kāwatea never got off the ground. But now that Jim Bolger and Winston Peters are mates again, Kāwatea has been refined and resurrected as part of the coalition deal. 4 new commissions will be established to develop policy and programs focusing on employment, education, health and economic development. However, the commissions will be driven by industry and community leaders rather than bureaucrats.
Really what we're looking for is grassroots level people. We've had policy advice coming out our ears over the last 10 years, and although that has served its purpose, I think the way to go, and most of us do think the way to go, is actually getting the people from the grassroots level who are practitioners, let's say, and let's take the Education Commission. Getting people who are practitioners, who are actually on the ground either delivering or even receiving Māori education.
June is set to be a major month on the Māori calendar. The government promises to deliver a comprehensive policy for Māori broadcasting in the wake of the ATN controversy.
We should have something that we should have had, I think, 5, maybe 6 years ago. And it's taken this long to get there. And maybe it's taken what we went through to get to this position. And I just think that, I can't release anything at the moment, but I think people will be reasonably happy with some of the ideas and some of the proposals that are going to come forward in June.
There will be progress in resolving the fisheries allocation debate. The Minister has secured an undertaking from the warring factions to stay out of court until the Fisheries Commission comes out with an allocation model in June. The government wants the issue sorted. If not, they may step in and create an allocation formula themselves.
If it's not settled, and we are continually in and out of court, then it looks very likely that some other people will have to deal to the issue. Now, whether that's the Crown or whether that's new commissioners is another point.
Also look out for significant progress on the treaty claims front. Ngāi Tahu legislation validating their $170 million settlement should be enacted this year. The Whakatōhea settlement is also on a similar path. And two other big claimants, Taranaki and Muriwhenua, should enter negotiations this year. The Waitangi Tribunal's report on the Muriwhenua claim will be released next Wednesday in Kaitaia.
In terms of how we go about settling them, well, I mean, we were quite adamant that in the coalition agreement that the so-called settlement envelope, fiscal envelope, was gone. And what we wanted to do was continue to actually settle treaty claims based on their merits. And we'll move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And I think that the coalition has a better feel for it than, say, in the past.
Another land issue that's been left unresolved for years, Māori reserved lands. The government faces pressure from both Māori landowners and leaseholders, but is determined to sort it out.
I will make this assurance, though, and there are a number of people in the coalition who want this issue sorted out once and for all. It's been hanging around too long, and well, really, it's been swept under the carpet by many a government. Basically, not for any mean reasons, but because they've always thought it too hard to deal with. That is not an excuse for letting it go.
Clearly, 1997 will be a critical year, as the government has set itself a tight timeline to deliver the results.
I just think that it is a golden opportunity to take some of the issues by the throat and give them a real shake-up. And maybe hopefully in the next 3 years that we can see some of the bad things that have been reported over the last, say, 10 to 15 years actually die into the past, leave them in the past, and we get on with, you know, lessening the disparities between Māori and non-Māori, more jobs for our people, more educational opportunities for our people, economic development for our rural areas as much as the city areas. And I just think that there is a huge expectation out there on myself and my colleagues. And although that's a real big burden, it's a real exciting burden that you can look forward to some exciting changes and some exciting moves. And we're only asking for 3 years. You know, we're only asking for 3 years. We're not asking for 70 years. We're asking for 3 years. And it'll be up to us to deliver. And that is the expectation out there. And so it makes us work a bit harder.
Well, I guess that is the expectation. It's a pretty tall order, though, isn't it, for 3 years? Is it possible to achieve a lot of these things in the 3 years he's talking about?
Well, I think it's possible to achieve them, but I would hope that he would have far more expanded expectations than that, because I think that Māori are not particularly interested in the 3-year time horizon that has characterised the electoral cycle in New Zealand. And in fact, I think that we're far more interested in deep, well-made investments that take us beyond the political cycles and offer real hope for change. So, I mean, I would hope that any commitment to progressing Māori policies, which I believe progress New Zealand policies, has to be on a longer time horizon.
Except, of course, you know, he's only got 3 years, and if the last 3 months have been any indication, that could be a pretty rocky road. I mean, there's been a fair bit of excitement in the first 3 months of this coalition government, not all of it very good.
Well, I think that one of the causes of that is the way that it's portrayed in the media. And I think if you look at the way that they've focused on the government and in particular Māori issues, I think that the media has done an injustice to Māori and to Māori issues. And I think that's one of the key issues. And accordingly, if you take what you see on television and through print media, yes, you would say that it's been a bad start. But really, the concern for me is the media coverage itself.
Is that right? Are these so-called problems real or are they imagined?
Well, I think that the media does have problems, and I think that that's probably particularly so in terms of issues Māori, because there are so few Māori involved in the media itself, and because the covering of Māori issues tend to be so superficial, and they also tend to be covered from a different cultural paradigm that seems to be an in-word these days. But I don't think it's terribly fair to lay it all at the door of the media. I think that the government, or at least the New Zealand First part of the coalition government of this first term, have not got off to a good start. And I think that there are areas where they do need to look at their performance, particularly given that New Zealand First campaigned on the basis that they would bring accountability back into the New Zealand political environment. And a number of the issues that have come to public light have been about accountability, I suppose, in some regards or others.
Yeah, I know, but you know, underpants and things like that, they hardly seem to be the sort of stuff that bring governments down. Yet that was a terrific focus for a very short time.
Yeah, well,
for a longish time, it seemed.
Yes, it was, and I suppose it's an appeal to the sort of lowest common denominator of New Zealand society to get into some kind of salacious gossip about people's underwear. But what I think the media did was miss the point to look at the whole context of Māori broadcasting, to look at how that came about, what the government's responsibilities and commitments were, whether or not the program was producing on the contract intended, and if directors were doing something different, then that was an issue as well. But to bury the whole discussion of Māori broadcasting and its appropriate role in our country under one person's pair of underpants, I think is a sad reflection on the level of media investigative journalism.
Early in that piece, Arana talked about the buildings look the same, but it's completely different inside. And I wonder whether that isn't at the nub of this issue, that here we have, for the first time ever in a New Zealand Parliament, we have Māori in the box seat. We've got 15 clearly recognisable Māori MPs, and we've got 2 or 3 others sort of toying with the idea of coming out of the closet. Now, is that the situation, you think?
Yeah, I think I have to return to the point that Hekia made earlier, is that we've got to look at long-term development in the political arena as well. And this is the first 3 years of many years' involvement. And I think that we have to look in the long term in terms of where we are going as a people. And 15 now, recognisable Māori. Hopefully we can increase upon that, but not only at the central government level, but also local body level and throughout the political representation, whether it be ETSA, Lotteries Board. That's where we need to be focusing, because things aren't going to happen just from central government. We have to take responsibility in our local areas as well.
I think too, though, that while it's true that the Parliament or the buildings look the same and the people may have changed, that was inevitable once MMP became our new electoral system. So what we have is a kind of conflagration of a number of changes occurring, and the representation, or the higher representation by Māori, is possibly the most visible example of that change that would have occurred no matter how many Māori we got into Parliament. I think that the change is good, but I think one of the things we've got to be realistic about in terms of our expectation on Māori politicians is that Parliament is a culture too. It has a language and a process and a structure and ritual and tikanga and kawa all of its own, and that just as we have had some debate about the changes that we might expect in our kawa and tikanga, those changes in Parliament will take some time. And I think that I would like to see at least a bit more graciousness about some of the change that needs to go on. And I mean both from Māori and non-Māori.
Okay, but nevertheless, I keep reading and we see things like saying that, you know, we're almost saying we're too uppity, that some of those guys there are flash Harrys, that they got the sunglasses and you know, and all the rest of it. Is that something that we're going to have a little rocky road over for a while and then settle down to a new paradigm, or is it something different?
Well, for me, I think that again, we've got to move away from looking at the people and focus on the issues. The focus for Māori broadcasting was on ATV, but really we've got to go back to the Te Reo Māori report. We've got to go back to what your team did with the Privy Council and get back to the core issues, which are active protection of our language, and not look at the individuals, but look at the key points of what we want, and that's development, and regardless of the individuals involved.
A couple of little things have happened just in the last few days which have been a focal point, and maybe that's something we have to recognise, that there will be these focal points from time to time. The America's Cup incident, the guy panel beating the America's Cup, and also at the museum where there were some people being inattentive, so one of the guys gave them a whack with a taiaha. Now, are those things that we're going to have to put up with? I mean, are they problems along the way with this new regime?
I don't think that they're particularly characteristic of Māori interventions in the political scene. I think that wherever people of any kind of background have a strongly held view about the inadequacy or the slowness of political change, will seek to find ways that draw attention to those. So I don't think that those particular actions are peculiarly Māori in the sense of bringing attention to the issues. I think that it is important who it is that's in Parliament representing us, and I think it is essential that those people have a grip on what the issues are and are capable, therefore, of carrying them out through the system they got elected to represent us in, which is Parliament. So yes, I want to see some change in Parliament, but I want to see it be successful change, which means knowing and understanding how the place operates so that we can be successful in it while changing it.
Yeah, but has it been operating necessarily? I mean, I've heard people complain like hell about people yelling and screaming in Parliament. All they're doing is singing a waiata in support for somebody down in the chamber.
Yeah.
Okay, but you see, is it that place has to change, and in 2 or 3 or 5 years' time, nobody will even think about that?
Oh, look, absolutely. I really don't know what all the fuss is about a haka and waiata being done in the galleries. About time, because it is such a very boring environment unless there's some really good debate going on. And I hope too that we'll see some more MPs actually in the House debating some issues, rather than, if anyone who has sat in on Parliament knows, that sometimes there's just the bare quorum there debating issues that we think are vital to our society. So really I think that all the concern about having a haka and waiata reflects on the insecurity of the people commenting.
Who do you think's driving all these sorts of things in terms of, and we see political opportunists like Richard Prebble taking the opportunity to call for the abolition of the seats and so on, but you mix a lot in Wellington circles with civil servants. What are they saying? They're not too happy, are they, about this new government, a new coalition?
Well, it's probably not entirely true. I don't mix as much with civil servants as I used to. I like to see myself now on the cusp between central and local government and local activity. I think that they are feeling very unsettled about it because it is a coalition government. It's the first time that civil servants have had to work for a government that's made up of 2 different parties. I think that they are struggling to cope with the changes that the electoral system has brought about. And I think that they are struggling with a struggle that was going on even before MMP, which was how do you ensure that people who are most affected by policy decisions actually get involved in that decision making. And MMP has brought that very sharply to the fore, that people now feel they've got a real voice in Parliament and they want to see some change in their lives, and they do not want the torpor of the public servant standing in the way of that happening.
When you make those forays down into Ngāti Pro, what do you find people talking about down there, about this new government and how it's portrayed in the media?
I think the people are still really waiting to see how it's going to affect them. Really, when it comes down to our people in Ngāti Pro, and I can't purport to speak on their behalf, but I would say from conversations, people want to see resources coming to them so that they have the opportunity to develop, but develop under their own steam. They want the opportunity to take and really use resources for their own benefit and move, like we move from dependency so that they can take part in their own development, and iwi development, hapu development, whānau development. And really the people are sitting back and saying, well, we can see all these Māori there, but really how is that going to help us in our development back home?
Yeah, because
let's look at some of the things that happen, of course, is that because New Zealand First, the junior partner in the coalition, is having such problems, then there's this divergence saying, well, you've got to excuse them because they're inexperienced, they've got a lot of growing up to do. And things will simply go back again to the senior partner who's been in the box seat for all this time. So are we looking at the stymieing of some of those initiatives because National, rightly or wrongly, is seen as being the senior partner, knows best in these matters?
I don't know that it's necessarily that National is the senior partner and knows best. I think I think there is a fair degree of inexperience being reflected by the New Zealand First members. For instance, there was recently a debate about who would be on the Māori Affairs Select Committee and who would chair it and so forth. I mean, I've scrutinised what Māori are on the other select committees that have a real effect on our lives. There are none on the Social Services Committee, only one on the Education and Science, none on the Commerce Committee, none on the Finance and Expenditure Committee, none on the Government Administration Committee, one, I think, on Local Government and Internal Affairs. Now, that suggests to me that we have tended to get captured more by hype than by substance, and the substance is that most Māoris do not live their lives in one particular sector, and that New Zealand First and other Māori MPs have to be at the power points within the system we currently have in order to effect the kinds of changes that we have been talking about here.
Okay, I look at the effects of things in South Africa. When Nelson Mandela went to power, huge expectation by his people in that country. On a smaller scale, there's been huge expectation that with more Māori in Parliament, there are going to be real changes. Is that likely to happen, though, in this 3-year period?
I would say yes. Already the coalition government has demonstrated by abolishing the fiscal envelope that change can be made. Because if you look at prior to the elections, you had Nationals saying that no, they were going to stay with the fiscal envelope. The coalition government has come and they said no, we're abolishing the fiscal envelope. So I think you've got to give credit where credit is due, and that there has been movement there. But I think that we've got to move away from the short-term thinking in terms of can we achieve it within 3 years, can we achieve it within 6? We need to look at long-term development. Where do we want to be in terms of mana motuhake, in terms of tino rangatiratanga? Where do our people want to be? And we need to look at what we want for ourselves, not necessarily what the government is doing. And we need to look at what we want and then match what government can with what we're doing.
What should we look out for in this next few months?
Well, I think that New Zealand First membership, the members in Parliament, do have a critical role to play. I mean, I think that the kind of changes that they are bringing about, their different behaviour, the different way they dress and all those kinds of things really are just superficial kinds of things that I'm not particularly concerned about. I am, however, concerned about the perpetuation or the portrayal of this image of the warrior cult, because it doesn't sit that comfortably with me as a Māori woman. And I think that New Zealand First do have to be concerned about their dropping in the polls, because they're not in Parliament as individuals, they're there as representatives of Māori, whom, as we've all agreed, have very high expectations of what they are going to do, which means that they do need to perform on our behalf, and that means getting in and doing the work and not being too concerned about upsetting people. But there's one other thing that I'd like to say, because there has been recent debate about deteriorating race relations and so forth. My view is that now the races are finally relating, we're discovering that there are relations that we have to talk about.
Okay, well that's something we'll have to keep an eye on over the year. Willie and Hekia, thank you very, very much for coming in this morning.
Kia ora.
In the same program, Marae began a series of profiles on the new Māori members of Parliament. This was the first instalment.
Being an MP is a bit like going fishing in the deep end. Engari, what happens when you're new to the game and the deep water turns to hot water? Here's Arana Taumata with the first of his series on our new Māori politicians.
Parliament buildings, newly refurbished and earthquake-proof. But in recent weeks, Parliament's minders must have been wondering whether this hallowed establishment is haka-proof. In recent weeks, the public galleries have reverberated with haka and waiata as scores of Māori have come to witness the maiden speeches of their whanaunga. Over the next 4 weeks, we will bring you highlights of the maiden speeches of our new Māori members of Parliament and ask why they are here and what they hope to achieve. The first MP we profile in this series is Donna Awatere Huata. She's been an educational psychologist and an outspoken advocate for Māori.
72% of Māori girls are leaving school without school C. Now, what does this mean in terms of their life in the future? It means that they are being prepared only for factory jobs.
She's also been a political activist who came to prominence during the 1981 Springbok tour. She was arrested 18 times.
Said that they are against the tour and he was not to come here.
She's also a successful businesswoman, consultant and mother of 7, amongst other things. She is now an ACT List Member of Parliament.
I think you come to a point where you have been an activist, as I have. I've been in business really trying to open up the public sector to Māori development. And I think it gets to a point where you simply realise that you have got to go into Parliament. That is the obvious next step. And now that I'm here, I'm positive this is the place to be if you really want to make change.
In her maiden speech, she spells out her goal: quality education for all.
I have a mission to do what I can to ensure that every single New Zealander, not just the well-off, not just the clever, has the opportunity to reach their educational potential. Every Māori Member of Parliament in our past has promoted the idea that education is the engine of social and economic change for their people, and I am simply following in their tradition.
You know, when kohanga started, it led to a huge explosion of preschool development for Māori people. When Kura Kaupapa got going, it also started the same sort of ball rolling. And I think what we've got to look at is more Māori providers, not just in Māori language, but more Māori running their own primary schools, maybe in English, but doing things their own way, led by the whānau, so that everyone draws strength from the whole process.
And as ACT's spokesperson for Education and Māori Affairs, and a member of the powerful Education Select Committee, she's in the right place to push these ideals. Another achiever of the highest class, Tuariki Delamere. He's a top scholar. He was the inaugural winner of the Huane Waititi Memorial Trophy for the highest school certificate marks gained by a Māori. He went on to study at universities in the United States, culminating in a master's degree. He was also a top athlete, representing New Zealand at the Commonwealth Games in 1974, after which he joined the professional athletics circuit in America. Those experiences have been punctuated with a successful career in both the private and government sector, and more recently as one of the key negotiators for the recent Whakatōhea deed of settlement.
MPs, politicians need to be generalists, I think, overall, to succeed as politicians, to understand all the different issues, rather than have spent your whole life doing one job, one occupation, and one very narrow focus. I think it's been a help that I've had a pretty broad and varied career, throughout New Zealand or throughout the world.
Although he's a newcomer, he already sits at the cabinet table. His main role is that of Associate Treasurer, Winston Peters' right-hand man. But even though there are now 2 Māori controlling the country's purse strings, there won't be any preferential treatment.
Most hui I go to, I'm at pains to explain to the elders, and I know Treasury's not a Māori word for Māori Development Fund, but it's great having 2 Māori involved in Treasury. There's never been a Māori involved in Treasury at a ministerial level before. We now have 2. We don't see ourselves here working as Māori in that sense. We're here working the portfolio, the Treasury portfolio, the finance portfolio, and doing it, sure, we're Māori, but also doing it, at the end of the day for the whole country.
He says he'll be guided by what's right and what's just, a theme he used in his maiden speech.
Over many years, a question I have often been asked is, what is it that Māori want? We want to be employed. We want to support our families. We want to educate our children, and for those children to have a better life than we have had. We want to be successful and happy. I believe, however, that there is one thing that stands above all others and unites Māori as no other. We want justice.
Ideals he says he'll be promoting at the all-powerful cabinet level.
Rather than relying on officials to convey the Māori viewpoint through to cabinet, you've actually got Māori in there who can do it for themselves.
Georgina Te Hiohio, the first Māori woman to become a lawyer. Georgina Te Hiohio, the first Māori woman to enter Parliament as a member of the National Party. But it's been something of a whirlwind entry. She was a member of the national team that successfully negotiated a coalition with New Zealand First.
Never for a minute imagined that I'd sort of be taken to a pretty high level and involved in what is history-making stuff, I think. I don't know whether it'll ever be quite the same again in terms of the way we go about forming governments in the future. But it was certainly new to everybody involved, and for me as a new person, very unique.
As a former member of the Waitangi Tribunal, it came as no surprise that the treaty was the core theme of her maiden speech.
As we begin a new Parliament, I would be seeking to ensure that the momentum for the settlement of claims continues apace as an important step in realising the treaty's full potential.
She also made a plea for Māori autonomy to be recognised.
Put simply, autonomy is the right to control one's own affairs in the context of claims for land, fishing, forestry and the like. It means the right of tribes to develop their own economic base and to fund their own programs. It needs only to be added that one's affairs are not limited to land and fish. They cover other things like language, education, health, the care of our children, the administration of justice. Future policy aimed at addressing disparities must accommodate the right of Māori to regain a degree of autonomy within every development that is of concern to them. There's got to be a recognition that Māori can find the solutions and will find the solutions given the right framework and support.
Georgina Te Hiauhiau also has the important role of chairing the Māori Affairs Select Committee. It could be an important forum for advancing Māori aspirations.
In August 1997, Marae investigated the response to the Māori electoral option, where Māori voters could choose to go on either the Māori or general electoral roll.
Well, last time it happened, some of us went all the way to the Privy Council to argue that not enough time was given for us to exercise our options. This time, the government, mindful of that experience, left the Māori option open for 4 months. And now, with 10 days left to run, there has been movement between the Māori and general electoral rolls, but for some reason or other, about 30,000 Māori eligible to vote still aren't on any roll. In Aorere today, we talk about the option and have guests from both sides of the argument, whether to enrol on the Māori or general rolls. We'll be back a little later, but in the meantime, it's over to Mātai.
Every 5 years, Māori have the opportunity to decide which electoral roll to be on, Māori or general. The Māori option has now been running for about 14 weeks. Kirsty Babington finds out how it's been going.
We've seen the ads.
Hey, have you done your Māori electoral option thing yet? Māori roll or general roll? Testing. Māori option. Kahi, rua, toru, wha.
E kōwhiringa Māori. Māori option. Your choice.
But what does the Māori option really mean for us? Results from this year's Waikato University TVNZ and Marae survey show that the majority of Māori do understand what the Māori option is and how it could affect the number of seats in Parliament.
I hear it's Māori electoral option time. Been thinking about where I'm going to go.
78% of those polled, however, said they were happy with the role they were on and didn't want to change. Movement between the roles so far has reflected that attitude. Many Māori haven't enrolled yet, however, and time is running out. Māori have always had the option of which role they would like to be on, Māori or general. But it wasn't until 1993, with the advent of MMP, that the numbers on the roll directly affected how many seats we have in Parliament. Until then, we were guaranteed full seats. In the last election, under proportional representation, with just over 136,000 on the Māori roll, we had 5. Numbers now dictate we can have 6 seats, and there is a potential 12 seats based on just over 290,000 voters. At the start of the option exercise to get 7 Māori seats, it was necessary for 17,000 to transfer from the general roll to the Māori roll, or that 39,000 new enrolments onto the Māori roll be made. To tell us how it's all been going so far is Murray Wicks from the Electoral Enrolment Centre.
It's about 18,500 Māori have transferred to date since the option started, and that's at the 3/4 stage. About 12,000 Māori have moved from the general roll to the Māori roll, and about 6,000 Māori from the Māori to the general roll.
Māori option is on again. Time to decide which electoral roll you're going to be on, Māori or general.
The Māori roll at this stage is growing 2 to 1 as far as transfers. But when it comes to new enrolments, and we've had about 7,700 new enrolments, the majority of those are going to the Māori roll. Over 7,000 have gone to the Māori roll. And the new enrolments also reflect the position of the young people. The young people are mainly the new enrollees, and they are going to the Māori roll in quite large percentages.
If you're Māori, it's time to think about which electoral roll you want to be on.
The arguments for and against going on the Māori roll are well documented. More on the Māori roll means less general seats and more Māori in positions where they can make decisions. were on the general roll could aid strategic block voting and also hold those from general seats more accountable on Māori issues. To spell out the pros and cons and what the option is all about is the team from Iwi Connections.
Have you heard of the Māori option?
We spent the day with the team at a shopping centre in Manukau City in South Auckland, where over 40,000 Māori live.
Okay.
Which one are you on? Are you on the Māori or the general?
No, the Māori.
Did you get your Māori option card this year?
No, not yet. We're targeting all Māori that identify themselves as Māori and educating them on the Māori option, and so that they've got a clear understanding of it, so that when they make their choice, they're making the right choice for themselves.
What do you know about the Māori option?
They can vote in the next election under the Māori electoral, wherever you live.
No. At the moment, we try now. Come on now. Yeah.
Is it something that you want to know more about?
Yeah.
Like I get a letter in the mail saying that I can have the option of being on the Māori electoral roll or just being on the general.
Nothing? Something you'd like to know more about?
Well, yeah, I suppose.
Don't know anything.
What do you know about the Māori option?
Māori what?
The Māori option.
No.
Nothing? Is it something that you'd like to find more about? It's about enrolling either onto the Māori roll or the general roll.
Oh, right, now I understand.
Yeah.
I'm on Māori roll anyway.
Oh, okay. Why the Māori roll?
I don't know. Probably because I'm Māori.
Despite the survey results we mentioned earlier that stated the majority of Māori knew what the Māori option was, a lot of those we asked were confused by the term Māori option. How effective then has this campaign been?
They want to know, one, what's in it for me? You know, like, why should I go on to the Māori roll? Why should I go on to the general roll? What is the Māori option? There's been a few out there that don't really care because of some of the issues that has happened. I mean, a lot of them don't think that some of the policies that's been designed out there haven't affected them, so they don't really care. What we've tried to do is we've tried to make them feel that yes, you do care, yes, you are important, yes, your vote does count, and you're an individual, and what you need to do is understand a lot of what these MPs are doing within your electoral boundaries. Are they taking care of your concerns? And by you getting onto the parliamentary roll, yes, you have the right to go and ask that MP within that electoral boundary, what are you going to do for me?
We have to know who we're going to vote for, and you know, where our election, where we're going to put our vote to.
Definitely. How old are you? 18. 18, so have you enrolled yet?
Yeah, I have, but I'm not on the Māori one.
So you opted for the general roll?
Yeah.
Why's that?
No reason, I just opted for that one.
Well, I like the Māori roll better.
I think what we can look at as a Māori people and what is expected by us and by those that are in power for us.
I'd like to see us get more seats in Parliament. But I've always been on Māori roll anyway, you know. I've had the option of going on the general election, but I chose to go on the Māori roll because I went on the Māori roll at that time because of Peter Jackson.
It's important, not just for me, but for my children, something to carry on. We've lost so much, we're just starting to regain what we have lost, and so I really would like to know more.
But those trying to reach Māori who would like to know more or that aren't enrolled are flying blind because an analysis of who those Māori are, where they live or what age they are hasn't been done. With only 10 days to go, the push is on.
Have you noticed any trends, any particular ways certain type of Māori or certain groups are opting?
You got some Māori who are in tauiwi relationships, you know, and I mean, and they've had generations of children, and it becomes a decision factor for them. Do I go on my Pākehā side? Do I go on my Māori side? Some of them have leaned to go more the general way. It's really been a 50-50 type situation. But I must say, though, because of the more proactive issues that are happening with Māoridom, a lot more are leaning towards the Māori roll. Yeah. But other than that, some of it is because of what's happened to our MPs, unfortunately. But, you know, we've had to try and go out there and teach them, if you're not happy with that MP, then come next election, when the boundaries are worked out, you now have a change, you know, you've got a choice to make a change, you know. We're telling them that as well, so that they don't think that because that MP's there, that MP's going to be there for the rest of their lives. You know, we have to try and show them the bigger picture rather than just here and now.
It's a pretty important name. Now, I'll give it some more thought before I make my choice.
The main message is fill out your form if you want to make a change from the Māori roll to the general roll, or from the general roll to the Māori roll. Fill it out, get it back to New Zealand Post before August the 27th. If not, field workers are out there, make a choice. If you don't make a choice and you're happy to be on the roll that you're on, then stay there. If you don't want to do nothing about it, don't moan. Don't whinge, don't carry on about what's happening in Parliament. You know, you took away that opportunity because you didn't want to participate on getting onto the parliamentary roll.
Talk to the whānau and make your choice.
He kōwhiringa Māori. Māori option. Your choice.
At this stage, it's unlikely Māori will get another seat as a result of this year's Māori option in the next election. To take the matter even further, here's Derek Fox and Odere.
Kia ora and welcome back to Odere. Well, after nearly 4 months of opportunity to switch between the Māori and general electoral rolls or to enrol at all, and with 10 days of that option still to run, it's estimated that about 30,000 Māori are still not on any roll. There have been changes between the two rolls, with about twice as many people opting to move on to the Māori roll as those who went the other way. But despite all of that, unless there's a dramatic change in the next 10 days, there will only be 6 dedicated Māori seats contested at the next election in 1999. 1 more than last time, but short of the 2 or even 3 more that some people hoped for. Shortly, we'll be talking to our 2 guests. Rangimaria Chase used to be on the Māori roll, but has now switched, and she'll be telling us why she did that. On the other hand, Anaru Verko is an advocate for all Māori moving onto the Māori roll, and we'll be finding out why after this report from Arana Taumata.
Have you enrolled on the Māori electoral roll?
Oh no, I haven't. The Māori option 1997, different from others, because there's been more time, more publicity money, but for all that, just 1 more seat has been achieved.
Well, no, it isn't a good result at all, because in fact prior to the option there already was a 6th Māori seat. So no, it's definitely not a good result. In fact, the option's been an absolute failure.
Why 4 months? If all other New Zealanders have until a month before the election to register in an electorate, why do we only have a 4-month period in order to get the information out to our people? I'm also disappointed because although there have been a large number of people enrolling on the Māori roll, at the same time there's been attrition and a transfer from the Māori roll to the general roll, almost 50%. So we're negating the object of the exercise to a certain extent.
The Māori electoral option is important because it determines the number of Māori electorate seats we have here in Parliament. But there's a concern that although most Māori voters know about the option, many don't appreciate the significance of this electoral right. Tu Williams is critical of the focus of the publicity campaign. He claims it has left many people with the impression that the option is just a voluntary exercise, which isn't that important.
He kōwhiringa Māori. Māori option. Your choice.
We're also concerned about the level of participation in the Māori electoral option. And for us, we believe that one of the major problems is the fact that the focus of the campaign has been on the choice factor rather than on encouraging people to participate.
Because of these alleged shortcomings, Congress wants the government to extend the option period and provide more resources for a more focused campaign. The government isn't keen because it'll require a last-minute law change.
Well, I think all things are possible, and if the government has a mind and a will to amend that legislation in order to meet the request that we have put to government through the Māori Affairs Select Committee, then I'm sure that that can be done.
Another issue of concern is our rangatahi. From last year's census, nearly 92,000 people aged between 17 and 24 said they were of Māori descent. But as of April this year, just 55,000 of these young people have enrolled as electors.
Ngā Tata Love heads to Purikōkiri, one of the agencies responsible for the Māori option. He's concerned about our lost youth.
Somewhere in there's a missing group, perhaps as high as 35 to 40,000, who aren't on any roll. Now that's of real concern, because if you really want to bring about change, you've got to be on the electoral roll, and you've got to then exercise your vote. It's no good sitting back and waiting for others to do it, because if you do that, they're going to have the say, and you're cut out of really the most important part of living in a democracy.
A message not only for our rangatahi, but for all those who haven't enrolled.
It's not just a question of what role you want to go on, but enrolling at least to cast a vote, because our chances under MMP are very much enhanced. So my greatest concern is the large numbers of our people who still haven't decided to go on any role at all.
Just sign there if you want to be on the Māori.
I'm really imploring our people to consider which role that they should be on. If they genuinely want change in this country, which is of benefit for us as a people, then they have to be on the Māori roll.
I hear it's Māori electoral option time.
This is an incredibly important take for Māoridom, because it is the only way in which we're going to be able to increase the number of Māori seats in Parliament before the 1999 election.
And if you are going to make a decision, then make it now, so that the day doesn't pass and you find that although you had all this time, you missed out at the last minute.
Well, we've seen the arguments there, but last time round you decided you would change. You went from the Māori role to the general role. Why was that?
Could I say I was disillusioned? Could I say that in the beginning I made a choice and then I had to learn to make a decision? And in making the decision on the facts that I had at the time, I didn't like where I was sitting.
Why didn't you like it? What was wrong for you?
I didn't feel that there was enough information to actually talk to me as a potential voter, a person who could make a change. In the first instance, it was about, wow, we can make a change. This is going to be a difference. This is something that Māori have required, needed and wanted, and we've got it. And I looked at it and I thought, what have we got? I didn't have a voice after that. Once I had done my bit with that round, that was it. It was over. I had nowhere to speak to anybody about it. I had no one to approach, in the sense that, now what? Where to from here? And I actually felt disenfranchised. I felt alienated, and I felt powerless.
What do you mean by that? Because it seems to me that you decided that for some reason or other you couldn't make a difference on the Māori role, so you switched to the general role, or did you switch because of that, because of this disillusionment?
I switched because of that, because when I went on the Māori role, I believed, in the beginning I was on the general, okay, and that wasn't even a conscious decision, but when I went on the Māori role, it was a conscious decision I made, or should I say conscious choice. The decision came later, and that was about me understanding where and how it implicated me in a system I had nothing to do with. Does that make sense? Like, I couldn't do anything about where I was at.
Probably not, but in terms of, was it a party process you were disillusioned with, or was it to do with the process of deciding you couldn't do anything on the Māori role and you wanted to switch to the general role?
I don't know if it was even that, Derek. I think what it was more about is that I felt that here was something that was supposedly happening to help Māori make a difference. But there was no forums. There was absolutely no forums to go to speak to about now what. I was on the Māori roll. I had a vote. I could vote for a Māori person to make sure that they were able to step into Parliament and possibly take our word to Parliament. But I had nobody to speak to. Okay, so you weren't satisfied with the campaigning that occurred in that particular seat. All right, there's been a bit of water under the bridge since then. What would you advocate now? People watching this program, which role would you tell them that you thought you would encourage them to go on? At present, I'm still disillusioned, and I wonder if that's about my attitude to personalities that are representing us, or supposedly Māori, in Parliament right now. And I feel kind of, when somebody says that they represent Māori, I'd like to think that actually includes me, not excludes me. But nobody's ever spoken to me about it, so I'm not sure if that is
I know you clearly believe that Māori should be on the Māori roll. What are the things you could say to Rangi Māori or to people like her to persuade them that they should switch and come onto the role that you're on?
I think Rangi Māori raises some interesting points here. Fundamentally, people get confused between the MMP structure and the party politics. And I think Māori have to realise that they have to cut out the politics and look at the structure that we have in place now and compare that to what we had with FPP. And under that particular system, there was no way in which we could gain any extra seats. We were locked into 4 seats, mo ake tonu atu. With the advent of MMP, it's provided Māori that space to develop a voice in Parliament. One of the things, I guess, that's militating against Māori MPs being actually able to address the needs of their people and their constituents is the size, the huge size of the electorates that they have to cover. Obviously then, if more people are enrolled on the Māori roll, that would mean a decrease in the size of those constituents. The geographical area will decrease, and of course there would be greater access to those MPs.
Of course, the electoral size has come down considerably than it used to be. But I wonder whether one of the points that I hear people talking about being on the general roll saying is that, look, we can influence the parties with MMP, with a proportional voting system. Every count votes, so we can still influence the parties. You don't agree with that?
I think people underestimate the power of party politics. We have to look at that particular dimension very carefully, because at the end of the day, whether you're Māori or Pākehā, as a candidate, you have a mandate to represent the party that is supporting you. And because of that, there are certain parameters in which that candidate has to operate. And sometimes those parameters, more often than not, work against Māori aspirations.
At the moment, there are something like 311,000 people, Māori, enrolled either on the general roll or the Māori roll. They're about evenly split, not quite. There are actually a few more on the Māori roll, and more seem to be going to the Māori roll. Why do you think that is?
Possibly there's the hope that it will be heard. Our word will be heard. Grassroots stuff will actually get to where we think it's going to go. I would hate to think, though, that we're out there selling something that doesn't have any foundation to say to Māori at the end of the day, hey, look, we've completed. Because up to date, we've seen nothing that's actually given us any say that it's working.
I guess what Rangi Māori is saying is that and I've heard people say that the performance of the present 5 MPs hasn't contributed towards people feeling good about being on the roll. Do you accept that, or how do you see that?
Well, of course, it's played a major role in the way that Māori view the option. And of course, Māori people are very passionate people, and sometimes their hearts go before their brains, and their mind, what they're saying is coming from the heart. But I think what people have got to take into consideration here is that I myself am not 100% happy with the Māori option the way it is, but that's where we start from. And that if people take in consideration that we're going to develop this and move on towards where Rangi Māori is talking about, where flax roots politics is being articulated and where the mandate from the community is truly representative in Parliament, then we have to begin somewhere, and I believe that's where the Māori option plays an important role.
See, despite a lot of the good arguments that people have advanced, saying that, you know, you should be on the Māori roll, and if we all went on the Māori roll, there'd be 12 or 13 or 14 seats, whatever it might end up being, a little under 50% of those people who've enrolled at all continue to be on the general roll. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a number of reasons, I guess. I come into contact with a lot of people who are rediscovering who they are, finding out about their identity, and they come back with a vengeance. There are some people who have been living in communities that haven't had that Māori culture around them or that sort of influence. And so they've been geared towards looking at the general role, I guess, as an option to cast their vote. Something that I need to say here, though, is that perhaps what was raised in the item before this interview about the education process, it was quite right. It was mentioned there that the focus was upon choice. I think people have got to be educated about what the possibilities are in developing this Māori option. What people also need to realise is that once every 3 years, tino rangatiratanga is vested in them. The power goes right back to them. And the way they use that power is going to determine their future. If they don't use that power or that right to vote, then they have to be content with the way things are.
I wonder whether that sets a bit pie in the sky in terms of expecting governments who for years have really tried to eliminate the need for Māori seats to suddenly change their spots and want to be able to educate people about the benefits of it. Because at the end of the day, you know, there are 15 Māori in Parliament at the moment. In reality, there's a heck of a lot more of non-Māori people there who get to call the shots in terms of what happens in these campaigns. So, you know, the Congress is asking for more time and more money. I mean, that seems to be ridiculous. This is the longest time we've had the most resources and nothing's happened really.
I think one of the arguments that's been touted out there in Māoridom is the formation of a Māori party. Now, I can see that happening. It's not such a pie-in-the-sky idea. If we have the right type of mandating, getting these types of people that we want into Parliament, then despite what parties these people may be sitting in, I can see a time where there might be a Māori issue on the floor, where people from different parties come to meet and agree upon a particular issue. And in that sense, they hold the balance of power. They may not hold position in government, but they certainly have a lot of influence in the way things will turn out for them in that sense.
Do you see something like that developing, or would you like to see? You wouldn't like to see something like that developing?
No. I think that if we look at it, if this has been going 4 months, 7,000 have come on, and half have gone off, 12,000 total. There's still something missing, and I guess we've identified in our social health and everyday living, the disparities are huge. Do we create another disparity now in an arena which may make some differences? For me, I'd like to think that we stay the way we are. If we can increase the seats as they are, then good. If not, a Māori party is not going to make a difference for us, because if Māori aren't getting on the general roll, if they are, or the Māori roll, sorry, and if they aren't voting, it's not going to make a difference. So we need to be working with what we've got. I think also that the time we were discussing age a while ago, and you know, this is a thrust from a younger generation saying, well, maybe my voice is going to be heard, maybe we can make a difference. I'm at a generation now that says, I don't know, I've heard it all before and I haven't seen a damn thing happen. And believing change, that's another thing. And talking about the mandate and the way it's done, and I talked about the continuity of the process, if you like, I actually found that, and I can only speak from my experience in this, that the particular party I had looked at, I felt that it discriminated in the sense that I was required to get an iwi mandate, and there were 12 iwi in the area.
Okay.
And I don't think that's very fair.
Okay. You said you were talking about a Māori Parliament. Do you see it being as a party, as formal as a party, or maybe a Māori caucus? Maybe a Māori caucus. I think Māori caucus is probably a better reality at the moment, a closer reality, and I don't think that's too far off at the moment. It's a matter of getting those representatives in place who are willing to put aside their party politics in order to achieve that Māori caucus, because that's what it really means. People underestimate the power of party politics. Well, there's one other point just before we go. Tita Whaiharuhira rang me just before the show and she said, look, this option's all wrong, because although we've got more resources and more time, the resources have all put in the wrong place. They've got plenty of ads on television. What we need is people going street to street. Do you have any concerns about the way the option's been run? Yes, I do. There certainly has been, it's been underfunded once again. I mean, we're going to go to vote very shortly about a referendum that's going to guarantee us a bright and happy future in our old age. And how much money have they spent on it? Something like $5 million has gone in towards that. And I see the Māori option as fundamentally, inherently, very important to the constitutional nature of this country.
and how much money has been spent on that.
About a tenth, or even less than a tenth is the answer. Well, what's your suggestion? Is the option conducted okay or no good?
No, I think we're visual people, we're contact people. We need to be talking to each other. And TV's fine, it's a medium, but how many of us actually watch the ads and take it in, and it's not until later we maybe say, oh, I've seen that, and it may be too late to make the difference. So.
Okay, look, thank you very much for both coming in. Ana te rangi Māori. That's Aurere for this week. We'll be back at the same time and in the same place next week, talking about the issues of the day.
For some contemporary insights into the workings of Parliament, you can view a collection of short videos from the Spotlight on Parliament series. Just head to the New Zealand Parliament website at www.parliament.nz.